in business, in success, the one who gets to the top of the mountain the fastest is the one that makes the most mistakes at the bottom. And so, I was like, oh, so then there are people at the top of the mountain that are offering to teach, people like that are still climbing up. And so I decided, it makes sense like in the early days to pay to be part of people's networks that, are already where I want to be, because that'll basically make it a lot faster. And so masterminds, I think, were a really big thing. Coaching programs. And granted, everyone and their mom has a coaching program, these days. And I would say most of them are not good, but there are some that are solid.
Hello and welcome to the Exponential Scale Podcast, the show where we talk about how tiny teams with big ambitions are doing more with less, scaling smarter, not harder, and building big businesses with teams that can fit around a dinner table. I'm your host, Ron Schmelzer, and on today's episode, we're talking with Max Kang, who's the co-founder and CEO of Cupkin. Hi, Max. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Ron, how are you?
Thrilled to have you here, thrilled to be here, and our audience, this is a great show. I'm really looking forward to it. It's great to find people like you who are putting a lot of the things we talk about into practice. So before we jump in, let's talk a little bit about what we call the shiny object problem. The type where you're a founder, you're running maybe 3 businesses, 2 side hustles, maybe a podcast about side hustles, and you wear the serial entrepreneur hat, really more a parallel entrepreneur hat, like it's a badge of honor at meetups. But the one thing that's actually working is sitting in the corner. It's underfunded, it's neglected, it's slowly dying while you chase the next dopamine hit of a new launch. I totally get it. It's a lot of fun. Ideas are constantly flooding your head. It's easier than ever now to actually act on your idea impulses. But making things a success is a real challenge. And what we're going to hear a little bit about today is like the real flex is not in how many businesses you can juggle. It's how many you're willing to kill so that the one that matters gets enough oxygen. One product, one channel until it's undeniably working. That's the discipline that most founders cannot maintain. And today's guest, Max here, has learned the hard, expensive, multiple failed ventures way, which is, of course, the best way of learning anything. And of course, he's a success now. So we're going to hear a lot about the success and what's made him a success and how he's gotten here. So if you haven't heard of Max Kang, he's the co-founder and CEO of Cupkin. Cupkin is a children's sticker book brand that became an 8-figure business with a core team of fewer than 5 people, and it almost didn't exist. What started as a side project to teach his daughters about grit became the top-ranked brand in the Amazon category through relentless focus, multiple painful pivots, and a willingness to go all in on one product and one channel when everyone else was telling him to diversify. So this is the leverage first scaling angle that we talk about. And he has now close to 1 million books sold per year, 66% plus year-over-year revenue growth, no VC money, no senior leadership hires, and a team that can fit in a single Zoom window. So using agencies as operating partners instead of building headcount. He's also the tale and success story in one package. Companies he's ran included at one point PrimeRadius, which he killed, LinkScout, which he closed, and running 3 businesses at once, which he said was a big mistake. But we'll get into all of that. We'll hear it straight from Max. So today we're going to go deep on why staying in the game is the actual strategy, why the product recall that wiped out his cup business was the best thing that ever happened to him, and what it means to finally learn how to read your P&L. So, hi, Max. Thank you so much for joining us on the Exponential Scale Podcast.
Of course. It's going to be fun today.
Yeah, so first, maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your story, and tell us a bit about your background and what you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So I went to UW. We'll just start at college. I don't have to go into how I grew up and all that stuff. So I got a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Washington here in Seattle. I thought I was going to be an engineer. My life ambition, for some reason, growing up as a kid, was to work at Boeing in the integrated defense systems. I don't know why. I just always had this dream of stopping missiles from the bad guys, and protecting the good guys, right? And so that was my dream. So I went to UW to fulfill that dream and got out of college, and I was a horrible engineer. I got laid off. I want to say between 4 and 6 times. I lost count after I got out. at the time, I was basically, coming up with excuses saying, oh, it was the economy. And granted, this was like 2007, 2008. So
Yeah.
there was a real economic depression going on. But the fact is, I was just a horrible employee. And so that whole process kind of kept spiraling. I went into a really dark place of kind of identity, all that stuff. And one day, my friend introduced me to this thing called SEO, and I got hooked. And I think being a mechanical engineer, kind of the stuff that I learned was, how to think about things, right? And so when I heard about SEO, I just went all in, 40 hours a week. I mean, I was literally at my computer just learning about this. That's how I came across people like Rand Fishkin. And so learned a lot from, folks like Rand and everyone in the community. And I built my own agency. Um, did that for a few years and got to a point where we were working with bigger companies like Match.com, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially, there was one point where I was like sharing these ideas with them, and nothing was getting implemented because, big corporate structure, you got to run it by PR, you got to run it by legal. And these were kind of time sensitive things. And just got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm doing all this work, I'm getting paid a decent amount, and nothing's happening, right? And so I want to make an impact here. And so it was then where I decided, hey, I really like this idea of e-commerce because you get to interact with customers, you get to, kind of learn about what their struggles are, and you get to kind of, interact with lots of people. And so I felt I could make a bigger impact in the e-commerce space. And so I went ahead and jumped from consulting to running e-commerce. And so the start was actually a supplement business. This one was one where a couple of friends and I bought a website off of Craigslist, like way back in the day. And at the time, it was selling legal steroids. And, like I was young, I was naive, I was hungry for money. And so I didn't really care. I didn't look to see like, is this a safe product to sell? I figured because he was already selling, the previous owner was already selling this for years and years, that should be close enough to be safe. And so we did this. And one day I was just like, what are we doing? This is weird. And so I asked my trainer, hey, what are the 5 supplements that you would recommend to everybody? Creatine, branched chain amino acids, whey protein, CLA, glutamine. And so I said, okay, let's go ahead and get these private labeled and let's sell these. And we put it on the website. Nothing sold. And at the time, I had a client that I was still keeping in touch with. He was like, "Hey, you should list on Amazon. I think you do really well there." And so I, selfishly wanted my garage space back because we had pallets in our garage.
Wow.
And so we sent everything to Amazon, and I forgot about it. And one day, a few weeks later, I got an email saying, "Hey, you made a sale on Amazon." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's right. We sent all this stuff to Amazon." And so I think being kind of, SEO minded, I went in there and I looked to see, okay, what is the big constraint right now? And it was our product images. I used Fiverr to get these really bad renderings made. And so I went to my neighbor who was a photographer and I was like, hey, can you take professional pictures of these products? So he did that. We listed them and then we made multiple sales. And so that's kind of how I got started, in the Amazon channel. That's how I got started in e-commerce. What really kind of took things off, after the first year, we were already a 7-figure run rate business, and it kind of scaled from there. And then we can kind of get into the Cupkin, part later, but that's essentially how I got my start into e-commerce.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I think, there's a lot of commonality to that story. People have heard sort of different versions of putting products up on Amazon. The buying a company off of Craigslist, I have to say, is the first time I've heard that one. I'm sure it happens, but I'm like, I haven't heard buying a company on Craigslist. But I think that was a great learning experience. And I think so it sounded like you just had a lot of product in your garage and just wanted to get it out of your garage. And the easiest way is to dump it in Amazon's fulfillment center, basically, and have them take care of it. It's kind of it's actually a nice way of decluttering your garage. I'll have to think about that one.
It's a great way. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's connect the dots there because I know your current success story sort of builds upon that. And there are a couple of additional company iterations that you went through at different parts of the strategy. And I feel what you're talking about very deeply because this is sort of the entrepreneurial story. You look to find a product and a market and the product market fit and the right channel. And you got good advice, which is really important because the advice really helps, especially if you're struggling and trying to figure out where to go.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I think once we got onto Amazon, I mean I just got obsessed. I just went all in. I stopped caring about our website. It's just what can we do to grow on this channel? And I think that's kind of where, the learnings that I made there from just kind of falling on my face, going into positions where like the big boy competitors, and I mean like the big supplement brands would, like start doing things like they would start bidding up aggressively so that I can't even compete, with like pay per click. Um, and so I learned a lot just through kind of entering one of the most difficult categories to play on Amazon. And so by the time it was time to kind of grow Cupkin, I don't know, it was a lot easier. It was so much easier to kind of, it was like batters when they get ready to bat, they have the weighted donut on their bat, they're taking swings, and by the time they're up to bat, it's like the bat's a lot lighter. And so that's kind of the analogy that I see there.
Yeah, that's good. So you learned a lot of those lessons of competing in a highly competitive space in Amazon. And I don't really know too much about the selling process on Amazon as a seller. Of course, as a buyer, I know quite a bit. But it sounds like
Yeah.
to show up in searches and to be in part of the customers also buy. It sounds like that's a pay to play operation. It doesn't really happen as organically as one would think it happens.
Yeah, I think that's the misconception, right? Like you send a bunch of product to Amazon, and I think a lot of I don't know what the statistic is, but I think everyone I've talked to, they kind of think that you send it to Amazon and then Amazon will start selling it for you. And I think the way I think about it is, Amazon, they're going to make money. Amazon, Walmart, any marketplace, they're going to make money regardless of whether your brand is in there or not, right? And so, if you can basically go in there and show Amazon head that, hey, this product outsells the product that is currently ahead of me right now in search, then the algorithm is going to move you into that spot because, oh, we actually make more profit from these guys, or we do more velocity. And so for them, they just want to show their end customers, which products are the ones that are getting the most velocity. And so when you say pay to play, it is absolutely a pay to play space. We lost so much money in the beginning by, having people buy the product on Amazon and then literally Venmoing them or PayPaling them, the full amount. So Amazon's getting their full cut, but we're losing out on, whatever Amazon's fees are. And so we had to do that for a good 6 months, to really gain that traction. And other categories, it's probably a less of a time frame, but I mean, we were in the creatine space, and so we were in one of the most brutal spaces to kind of grow. But that's essentially how we did it. We lost a lot of money to get to that position, and then we made a lot of money.
Interesting. Ooh, stories you don't hear, like how you basically paid your way to get to the spot. And
Yeah.
I guess at that point, then it's just self-fulfilling of that. Then you don't have to do as much of it. Amazon does the rest of the caring for it. Interesting story.
Yes.
I'm sure it's like that in probably every industry, and I guess you have to figure out how it is. Like, how do books get to the bestseller list?
Yeah.
Things like that. You never don't really know. So let's walk us up to kind of where we are now, because there were a
Yeah.
couple of companies between now and then, and in our little email exchange are fantastic, by the way. Really appreciate how open you are and quick to respond as well. I really appreciate that. At some point, you developed something called Crazy Muscle. That's
Mhm.
the thing you're talking about now. Is that's
Yep.
the okay?
Correct.
And it's still up and running, correct?
Yep, still up and running. We haven't done anything to it in about 3 years, and so yeah, it's just one of those things where I feel bad because we can't devote any resources to it, but at the end of the day, it's stable, and so yeah,
Well, obviously something is doing better than that. Because if you're able to not focus on that as much, something else grabbed your
yeah.
focus. So I think now you had some interim companies that you had built, the
Hmm.
PrimeRadius and LinkScout, which we talked a little bit
Yep.
about. So maybe you want to talk about those businesses. Where did the ideas come from, and kind of what happened with them, and I guess your lesson learned, and try to pulling all these things together at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. This section will be pretty quick because there's not much really to share here. So LinkScout was a SaaS company that I was trying to build. mainly to kind of replicate what I was doing on the SEO consulting side. So my specialty, and it goes back to focus, right, was link building. And so I was trying to build relationships with other websites, get clients, and then leverage those relationships to basically get links from those websites to my clients so that they could basically show up higher in Google search. Um, and the whole idea was, okay, there is a systematic process that I've developed here, and so let's create software that can scrape and do all the. I mean, if Claude existed back in the day, oh gosh, this would have been so easy to code up, right? Especially with MCP and all that stuff. But um, yeah, I thought I could create that. I found a developer. I tried to get it developed. I'm not a technical person. I mean, I know how to use Claude like a madman, but in terms of code, I can't write a line of code to save my life. And so that one just did not. I was bumbling and struggling through that. And essentially, I was working with a guy named Dan Martell. He was my first business coach at the time. This is before he blew up and became this massive social media, rock star. But yeah, he just sat me down one day and he was just like, look, man, you're trying to do this supplement e-commerce thing. You're trying to do this SaaS thing. Like, you are not going to succeed in either of them if you keep splitting your attention here. So pick one. I will support you. And so it just knee-jerk reaction. I said, I want to do e-commerce. And he goes, okay, let's do e-commerce. And so that's kind of what made me kill the idea of LinkScout. Um, and I went all in with e-commerce. And so built some success with the supplement category once I was able to pay my way and kind of get into these like high organic spots. The thought kind of came to my mind. I know a lot about Amazon now. I've got some money that I want to invest. And so what if I started a consulting agency that would kind of put some good content out there, attract some buyers, and then I would say, okay, this brand resonates with me. Let me invest in them and actually kind of help them grow. So that was the whole idea behind PrimeRadius. Um, Essentially, I would talk to a lot of people and it just would not be a fit. And so I just realized after I think 14 or so calls, I was like, yeah, maybe I'll shut this one down. This was a big waste of time. And so shut that one down. And I again went back all in with Crazy Muscle. I think this was about 2017, 2018-ish. And the idea for Cupkin had kind of come across our plates. My wife at the time was wanting to get rid of all the plastic in our cupboards and cabinets and stuff. And so, we went on Amazon. We started looking for plastic-free drinkware. And at the time, we were big Hydro Flask, like, Yeti fans. And so we liked that powder-coated stainless steel, design. And so we were looking for that for kids, and we could not find a single thing out there. And so I was like, well, I've got some contacts, that manufacture in China. Let me see if any of them do cups. So I reached out, and eventually I found a cup manufacturer. We had a small run of cups, blue, green, and pink and purple. And so we filled our cabinets. We fulfilled our dream of doing that. And then we had a bunch left over. And so I thought, hey, the kids, my kids were very young at the time. They did not see what I had to go through to kind of get to a point where we can have this comfortable lifestyle. And so I wanted to show them grit. And I felt like that was the only thing that I could really give to them as a parent who is not the primary parent. And so that's why we started Cupkin. We kind of built a process around it. I documented everything. And the idea was I'm going to give this to them one day when they're older so they can kind of see how this brand was built and how you impact people around the world. And so we did that, and COVID happened. And gyms shut down like mid-March, I think. And so this tanked Crazy Muscle like overnight. I think we went down 80 plus percent that night. And so the next morning I was just sitting there like, what do we do? We had a great team at the time, great team as in like 3 people. And so I didn't want to lose a single one of them because they were just fantastic. So we pivoted. We had a hard pivot to growing the cups business. And so from there, we went all in with the cups because I honestly thought Crazy Muscle was dead. I didn't think he would ever come back. And so went all in with cups, and within 4 months, we had hit a seven-figure run rate. And we just kind of kept scaling different colors. We kept going all in with that. And I think we eventually came out with 24 different colors. Um, and then we went from 8 ounce to 12 ounces and then to 20 ounces. So we had a pretty decent sized cup portfolio, if you will. Um, a few years later, my wife, had told me she had always dreamed of like being a book author. And I talked to someone that was in publishing, and he was just like, no, 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 don't do the publishing route. If you can self-publish, do that. And
Mm.
so we were thinking about, okay, the copywriter, all the editorial stuff, like what if we just made like sticker books? And my wife was like, yeah, that's great because all the sticker books on the market suck. And the reason why she said they suck is because when you open a sticker book, like the way they hot glue the binding, all the scenes are in the front, all the sticker sheets are in the back. And so if you think about it from like a kid's perspective, they
Right.
open it, they have to go to the back of the book, like pick a sticker, flip back to the front, put it down, and then there's this constant flipping back and forth. And then, kids' attention span, they will lose interest if they have to work hard for it. And so we were like, okay, what if we just did spiral binding? That'll allow us to do like side by side design. It'll also allow the book to like kind of lay flat in their lap, and no one is really doing this. And so we made our first sticker book, and this is kind of in the heyday of cups. Cups were doing really well. We were really pacing toward eight figures, at that point.
Mm.
And then 2023 happens, and we get a message from this lady, and she says, "Your cups have lead in them."
Oh,
And we were like, that's not possible because we had our cups tested twice. We told our manufacturer that, hey, don't use lead resin, when you seal the vacuum seal, use these glass beads. And the only way we even knew to ask that was we had an interaction with the initial founder of Hydro Flask early in our growth. And he told us this. And we're like, okay, glass beads it is.
yeah.
So we did that. We had it tested at two separate CPSC approved facilities who issued the CPC for us. CPC is the Children's Product
Hmm.
Certificate. And so we thought we had done everything right. And so turns out after we had it tested at a different lab, they were like, yeah, there's lead, underneath the powder coating. And so we obviously issued a voluntary recall. This was my first time doing a recall. And so I didn't know what to do. I, contacted a lawyer. We stepped through the process. I Googled a ton, and yeah, so we contacted the US CPSC. We worked with them to do the voluntary recall. And that just devastated the cup business. And so it pretty much went from many, many millions to many, many not millions. And so at the time, the sticker books maybe selling like 1 to 10 a week. And so we had to hard pivot again and basically go all in with sticker books. And so that's kind of how we went from selling or doing consulting to supplements to many distractions to cups and then finally to sticker books.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I have a lot of questions.
yeah,
First of all, it's a great story. I like it because it's very revealing. It's the kind of thing where people's like, "Yeah, I was successful the day I was born, and I never looked." That's the sort of thing you get, the vibe you get, especially
yeah.
if you pay too much attention to Instagram and LinkedIn, you get a lot of that vibe going on. I like this sort of success from failure, a lot of failures, and being direct about it. So, of course, the first question to have is around the focus question because we were just talking about how your advisor said you got to pick between the link company or the prime
Mhm.
company and the supplements, and you're like, I'm all in on supplements. And the next thing we know, wait a second, you're selling cups. So
Yeah,
before, and this is before the pivot. And I know that COVID, of course, happened. That wasn't something anybody was predicting. So it's not like
yeah.
it was a failure of your ability to forecast that. But I guess you had already in order to make that pivot, you had already started with the cup. So I guess the question was
Mhm.
like, well, what happened with
Yeah.
the focus question? Like, how did you
Yeah.
decide? Was it purely just a passion project and it wasn't really a
Yeah.
business? And but it seemed like you also had some sort of signal somewhere that that there was some
Mhm.
demand there because it did allow you to pivot.
Yeah. Great question. So the plan was to never turn Cupkin into a legit, like, not, I don't want to say legitimate business, but a real business, right? Once we sold through the cups, the plan was basically to shut it down and to give my kids the artifacts of what I did to build it and what I did to sell, right? And so that was really the goal for me personally, is to basically give them that file, that folder. When they get older, they can kind of go through it and be like, ah, so this is what he did, and this is how hard he blah blah blah. The only reason we went all in with it is because we had the constraint of Crazy Muscle just nosediving because of COVID. Had COVID not happened, I honestly don't think Cupkin would be in existence today. And so that was kind of what forced us to do that hard pivot, to go all in with cups at the time.
Yeah, and I guess this must be from your experience with Amazon. Like, where did you get the signal that there was going to be sufficient demand for that? Because one thing to say, well, I have interest in this, and it
Mhm.
sounded like a solid reason. Get plastic
Yeah.
out. Now you're making me worry about all the plastic in my uh, cupboard. I probably shouldn't be
Yeah.
talking too much about this, but seriously, there must have been some signal you had at some point to say that it wasn't going to be like we're going to make this pivot, but the pivot could have hit a wall. So, like,
Mhm.
how did you get that signal that there was something there?
I wish I could sit here and be like, oh, I did some keyword research and I discovered that this was an untapped opportunity. It was purely my wife said, hey, there are no good cups on the market. I can't find anything. And so, only because I already had the relationships in China, the manufacturing contacts, I went ahead and said, okay, well, let me just make, like do a small run, and then I'll sell on Amazon. And then for her, because she saw how well we were selling supplements, she was like, I don't doubt that you're going to be able to sell these. But if this gets me what I need, like the stainless steel cups, then have at it. And so that's kind of the reason why we did that. It wasn't because I saw the opportunity. It turns out there was a massive opportunity because I mean, as you know, Stanley kind of went through a ripper in terms of, getting to like 700 million in top line or something like that. And then of course they dropped a bit. But I think at the time, because people were staying home all the time, kids were home, they were drinking stuff. And so I think at the time, again, there was nothing on the market for kids. And so we come out with pastels and earth tones and all these like really cool colors. And then people just they just went bonkers, for the brand. And so again, it turned out to be the right time, right product, right place, but it was not intentional.
Yeah, well, get me to the sticker story then,
Yeah,
because
that sounds good.
again, you were hit kind of out of the blue with the hey,
Mhm.
there's lead in your product, and as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that tanked the business. But you were sort of ready to go with something in its wake. So, I guess the focus
Yeah.
question, because people saying you should focus, but you always
Yeah.
have something in your back pocket, right? So
Mhm.
so where did that come from? Again, was it just purely personal interest and you
Yeah.
put it up and your interest happened to match a lot of other people's interests, and you're doing now 8 figures just on the sticker book business.
Mhm.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think the way I think about like Amazon growth is, like it's like a stepwise function, like very rarely do I see like Amazon growth trends like follow a very clear linear, like growth stick up. What I've noticed in this business, in that business, and then also, some of the businesses that, like my friends run that I've seen their numbers, it always follows this just step pattern, and kind of the way I've internalized it is, you grow very quickly once you start ranking organically or decide to dump a ton of money into a product line. And then there's kind of like a flat line, like you'll hit saturation, you'll rank very well. And on Amazon, I mean, there's only a certain amount of people that are searching for specific products. And so you'll hit that flat line. And the only way to grow is to either roll out new products, like variations of that product, or roll out completely new products. And so at the time, I wouldn't say we were like 100% saturated with cups, but we were getting to a point where every incremental dollar that we would spend on advertising was basically making our performance degrade pretty aggressively. And so to me, that was signaling, okay, we spend a lot on advertising right now, and we can't really go up the funnel anymore because we're just losing so much here. And so that was kind of my signal to say, okay, one product, one channel. We are not diverging from this channel. We feel like we've saturated this product. So the next move is either we go to a new channel with the product, or we get a new product for the same channel. So that was kind of the decision there. It's okay, sticker books is the next obvious one because we're serving the same customer. And so that's kind of how we got into the sticker book path, because we knew that we were going to go all in with the same channel.
Sounds good. So your primary ICP, as it were, is sort of
Mhm.
parents with young kids. Sounds like that's the demo.
Exactly.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you figured it's obviously working out really well. So let's talk about so the business is doing fantastic. Hopefully there won't be another out of the blue moment. I couldn't quite possibly think about what that would be, but I don't know.
You
People
you
stop
never
having
know.
people decide to not have kids anymore. I don't know. But
Yeah.
and I guess, in terms of the last big, question follow-up with that was that you have been able to get some good advice,
Mhm.
consistent advice. As you mentioned, you were able to talk to one of the Hydro Flask founders and who told you about the glass beads, and you got another
Mhm.
advice from that founder who told you to focus. So how are you getting finding these advisors?
Mhm.
And, sort of what's maybe some advice that you could provide others who are looking to find good
Yeah.
advice?
That is a question that I had not thought of ever of answering. But it's a great question. And I think, people like say corny things like your network is, or your net worth is your network.
Right.
Or
Mhm.
sorry, it's the other way around. Other way around.
Yeah,
But I
exactly. No,
think,
that's true though. It's you,
yeah.
you're the people you surround yourself with
Mhm.
help determine your success to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like for me, the what I did early on was I realized, not because I had this decision on on myself. It was because I heard it, I heard someone say it, and they were like, look, in business, in success, the one who gets to the top of the mountain the fastest is the one that makes the most mistakes at the bottom. And so, I was like, oh, so then there are people at the top of the mountain that are offering to teach, people like that are still climbing up. And so I decided, you know what, it makes sense early, like in the early days, to pay to be part of people's networks that, are already where I want to be, because that'll basically make it a lot faster. And so masterminds, I think, were a really big thing. Coaching programs. And granted, everyone and their mom has a coaching program, these days. And I would say most of them are not good, but there are some that are solid. There are some masterminds that are just absolutely amazing. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I've gotten from these, like, masterminds is not like what was said in the masterminds. Like, yeah, maybe there were a few strategies where I did it and, we had like a 10% bump or whatever. But the biggest value for me were the relationships that I made. There are some people where I have standing monthly meetings where we just talk about the big things that we're struggling with. We share what's working, we celebrate each other, and we've been doing that for years now, And so I think for any young founder or founder that has never done this, I would strongly encourage you to find people, kind of it would be your dream to connect with them. Like Dan Martell calls it a dream 100 list. And I think if you can make that list and see, are they offering coaching? Are they offering, whatever? Even if it's like, if they're charging $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour, that 1 hour could just shrink your timeline of getting from here to there a lot faster. So.
Mhm. That's highly valuable. Well, I appreciate that. And one of the great things that we're building at Scalabrate is this community of small team founders looking to scale big in this new era that we can. So I encourage others, and I hopefully will invite Max to come join us at our own little roundtables in the future. But
Totally.
that's for a future date. So let's actually get a little more into direct to consumer, because actually there's a lot
Yeah.
of great little insights. This is clearly your area of expertise, and one that I think you could now be a great mentor at yourself. And I'm sure you are already providing that guidance and advice to others. But talked a little bit about them. Has anything changed recently in Amazon and the ability to
Mhm.
start brands there? Shopify, of course, is the big juggernaut in the space.
Yeah.
Why choose one or the other? And you actually, like, your side comment about publishing is actually rings very true.
Mhm.
I've published a number of books myself with traditional publishers, and quite recently, I reached out to one of my publishers because I'm writing a book on this leverage for scaling movement and sort of what's changed in the laws of entrepreneurship and how venture funding is changing and all that sort of stuff. And they're not really providing much of a callback, which is
Oh,
interesting in and of itself. And I'm thinking,
yeah.
wait a second, when I had to put together this proposal, because you have to put together a proposal, you have to say, how are you going to sell it? What channels do you have? How are you going to promote it? How many books can you sell? And I'm thinking, if I can just do that, why don't I just do that directly? What exactly am I getting from the publisher? And you sort of made that side comment that people have given you the advice that maybe you're not really getting that much anymore from the publisher. So this whole direct to consumer, working through channels, Amazon versus Shopify, it sounds like you have a lot of experience and advice in that perspective.
Yeah, I think, for me, like it was because like basically the way I think about it is like Amazon or Shopify, right? The age-old debate. And so, I think with if you go all in with Amazon, they kind of take care of like I would say the marketing aspect, a lot of it is kind of taken care of for you if you can get ranked organically. You can go in there and blow like tons of money, like 1,000, 2,000, $10,000 a day. And you can make sales, but your bottom line is going to be just horrendous, right? Or you could basically say Shopify because I'll have sky high margins, but I need to go out and figure a way to get people to the site. So organically, you could rank in Google. You could spend a ton of money on Meta. I think for me, the easiest thing was because of my organic search background. Let's focus on getting to the top of Amazon organic search for as many keywords as possible, and let's stay there. And so that's our marketing strategy. And so we do layer in things like Meta and Pinterest that go to our Amazon storefront. And we have noticed that our conversion rate stays flat. We've noticed that our organic revenue ratio that's going up, and it makes sense, right? Because if you are sending outside traffic to Amazon, that it basically looks like organic traffic to Amazon. So those are the metrics that we use. I get scared when I think of like Shopify. I don't know how these big brands leverage Meta to grow their businesses, and I've heard from those people that currently do that. I don't know how you rank well into Amazon and stay there. So it's like it's just basically different paths, right? And I just happen to be really good at this path, and I am horrible at the other path. So,
Yeah. But on the publishing front, you decided, like, the way I like to think of it is like the publisher and their network supposedly is supposed to offer a similar benefit as like an Amazon, where they're giving you access to, the bookstores and that sort of stuff. You don't have to build that relationship, which from your
mhm.
perspective on Amazon is great. They bring the market and you're providing the
Yeah,
product and you're giving up, points of margin basically in exchange for that. But at the
mhm.
same time, that's not working so well on the like the publisher front, or like you or some other perspective. And I think also, are you looking at direct retail as well? I think you are, right? There's some things going on there. So maybe you
Yeah.
could talk a little
So
bit
this
about all
this
that. Yeah.
this this is the first year where we're actually starting to talk to the big box stores and build out retail channels. And the reason why we waited so long is because we wanted, again, single product, single channel, like, single focus, right? And so rather than going to retailers and just being like, "Hey, we have a sticker book and it's great," blah blah blah. We wanted to wait and go to them and basically say, we're the number one bestseller on Amazon. We do, about 1 million books a year. Basically come to them with proof, right? So that the conversations are a lot easier. And so, yeah, we decided to put our heads down and focus D2C. And I consider Amazon to be D2C, although a lot of people say it's not D2C, it's marketplace, but for me, we're selling technically directly to consumers, even though Amazon is housing it. But anyways, yeah, retail is something that we are actively pursuing right now. We are currently talking to two big box stores, and we have our fingers out with a bunch of smaller channels.
Yeah. So that's going to be an interesting part of the conversation because, as always, it's all about expanding your market and, all of that. I think we're all going through this at the same time, trying to figure out when do we go direct? When do we use a platform? How do we use a channel? How do we invest in that channel for growth? So you have a lot of experience there. So let's talk a little about the team because the team is pretty
Yeah.
small now. So you
Yeah.
mentioned, I think you said you carried over some of the original founders from the Muscle brand, right? And
Mhm.
and and the supplements company. And is it still the same team? Maybe you could talk about how you built your team and I guess your philosophy on
Yeah.
keeping the team tight because that's definitely what we're focused on here.
Yeah. So the team has changed quite a bit. Like I think so for reference, when we were all in with supplements, the team was all dudes. And as we transition to the kids brand, now our core team is all women, minus me. And so I think it's just one of those things where I've worked with both genders, and statistically, I don't want to say that it's for every person, but statistically, what I've noticed is women are just better core team members for our business. And I think it's because I think ego plays a big part, in a lot of men. They want to get in there, and it's not anything because they have ill intentions. I think it's because they get into a small company and they want to prove themselves. Like they want to they want to basically take the big home run swings. And for those baseball players that, like try to hit the most home runs, they also strike out a lot. And so I think, we notice that okay, when they win, and but they lose a lot. And what I've seen with women is they are so consistent, and I'd rather have consistent singles. And I don't know why I keep using baseball terminology. I'm not really a sports guy, but I'd rather have consistency than like the occasional like big pop, right? Um, but yeah, our team right now, we have Jamie, who is kind of running our day-to-day operations. We have Megan, who is our kind of head of creative, like brand director. She wears a lot of hats, and we have my wife, who heads all creative. So any new product development, anything with the brand, it's basically her, and Megan supports her, but Megan is also doing like social content, managing the marketing, agencies, all that stuff. And so yeah, that's the core team. We do have some VAs that we've been working with for a very long time, and they kind of support like the nitty-gritty stuff that AI just can't do right now. And then we also have two agencies for Amazon and for our D2C marketing, like our Shopify, Meta, email, all that stuff.
So I guess as you start to grow, what's your philosophy on
Mhm.
sort of the team? I mean, a lot of people resort to, hey, I need this functional area. So they start building up the team. And the next thing you know, you need team to manage your team. You have layers of hierarchy, and that's when things start to go crooked.
Yeah.
And then people have to raise money
Yeah.
so what is your sort of when you're looking far out, when you're looking at that destination,
Mhm.
where do you see the company and where do you see the team and all that coming together?
Yeah, I think like the way I like to hire, hire people, and it takes a lot longer, but for like marketing, for example, the reason why Megan stood out to me from everybody else was because as I was talking to her, she would tell me things where I would be like, wait, what? And it was just so many stories and so much perspective. And I think for me, it was that difference in perspective that really attracted me, because I'm like, okay, she's seen a lot of things. She has a lot of stories. She has a lot of experiences. And so that kind of signals to me that if we're trying to do a creative or whatever, she's going to have more perspective than someone that doesn't have all these life experiences. For Jamie, she actually reached out to us in the early days of Cupkin because I was sending out these like Friday raw emails, and it was just like, hey, this is Max, the founder of Cupkin, and this week I had to deal with this, like blah. And so I would just share like real things and not polished. It was just plain text, and it was just, like the wins and the losses for that week. And people really loved that. And so Jamie reached out, hey, is there any open position you have? And I said, I think we can make one. And eventually I found out she was a green belt Six Sigma, PM. And so I said, hey, do you want to own the operations of the business? And she was delighted. And so she kind of took that role. And but I think as it kind of pertains to hiring, I like to kind of keep the headcount budget about 5 to 8% of top line. And I think for me, that's always kind of been a nice like range for me to know, do we have the budget to hire, someone else? And if so, what are the big constraints right now of the business? And so we'll look at each team and we'll look to see, okay, are they burnt out? Are they showing signs of getting burnt out? And if so, what are the things that they're doing repetitively that we could either get software to do it, or we could bring someone in that specializes in that specific thing to do for them. And so that's kind of how we've been building the team. I think for the most part, we try to run a very simple business so that we don't have to get complex with, team structure and roles and all that stuff.
Sounds good. And any thoughts about like, working with other it sounds like you work with other companies as well,
Mhm.
agencies you mentioned, and contractors. Is there like a preference to outsource first and then decide what really needs to be core to the team that can't be outsourced, or have you come up with a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think, like operations, I think that has to be an internal thing, right? Because there's just so much sensitive information, that kind of does that. And then I think you definitely need an owner to own that part. I think with Amazon, having an agency run that, I think that makes sense until you get to a point, maybe when you're like nine figures, maybe, or upper eight figures. Maybe it makes sense to bring a team in-house and kind of run it internally. But I think one of the things I appreciate about agencies is they get to see different brands, right? And so they get to see this brand and that brand and that brand. And then if we have like a down day, it's like unexpectedly down. They can see, oh yeah, things are down across all accounts. And so I actually get a lot of safety and value from that perspective. And then on the D2C side, what's really cool is our fractional CMO, he comes with the full team. And so he has an email manager, he has a Pinterest manager, he has copywriters and editors and all that stuff. And so for us, we don't have to manage those folks. He manages them. And we basically just tell him, this is where we're heading, and this is what we need to get eyeballs on. And so it's actually a pretty decent structure.
I like that. Yeah, we haven't spent too much time on the podcast talking about fractional hires
Mhm.
as sort of separate from the whole contract and fully employed. So I like that. That's a
Yeah.
nice little reference. Keeping an
Yeah.
eye here on their time for you as well as our guests. So just one last question before we always have our rapid fires at the end. We ask everybody the same three questions. Before that, I think one little confession you made in the back and forth we had was that you learned to read a P&L statement, profit and loss, about 3 months ago. And
Yeah.
you've been doing business for a while now, so I guess you said you weren't embarrassed to say that, but it's
Mhm.
striking. Of course, you're an eight-figure founder. So what changed when you finally understood the financial mechanics of your business, and what kind of motivated you to do that? And maybe what would you tell other founders who are,
Yeah.
not maybe P&L specifically, but something
Yeah.
else that they surely should know how to do?
Yeah, so I've always been the kind of a shoot from the hip kind of entrepreneur. I hope a lot of entrepreneurs out there can relate to this, but it was always hey, if the numbers do this, then let's do this. So I was very reactive, and yearly if annual planning, we did none of that. And even if we did some sort of a plan, we would pivot so aggressively. We would go from this strategy to, oh, stop. Let's shift and do this. And I think the team was getting kind of like a, yo, you're giving me whiplash, right? And so this January, kind of going back to the topic of masterminds, I started working with the founder of Raw Nutrition, Dom Iacovone. So just rock solid human being. I love that guy. So Raw Nutrition is one of the biggest supplement companies on the planet. He works with Chris Bumstead, who is Mr. Olympia, Mr. Five times Olympia or whatever it is. But yeah, during one of the like in-person workshops, he broke down a P&L. And I think when I saw it, my immediate reaction was to just shut down and not pay attention because I'm not a numbers guy, even though I am a numbers guy. But he broke it down in a way where it clicked. It finally clicked. And I was like, he was talking about CM1, CM2, and I'm like, I have no idea what CM1 even stands for. And so someone asked a question and then he said it, contribution margin. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he broke it down. That night I went back to the hotel because this was in Miami. I live in Washington. Went back to the hotel and I just started working on this P&L and I just got hooked. And so what I love about it is because it tells you where the business is doing well and where it's not doing well. And there were so many weeks where I would get up and I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know, what do I focus on? Like, what is my job as the CEO? And I think now that I know how to read a P&L, we have P&Ls implemented, I know exactly what to do. If a number is not doing well for this, this contribution margin is below a certain amount, then this is where my focus is all week. And I work with the team, I ask questions, and I give them the tools that they need to get this number to where it needs to be. And so that was kind of the genesis of how it started. So again, 3 months ago is where I learned about it. And we've only been operating for 3 months now, and we've already seen significant improvements in terms of where to focus.
Fantastic. Love it. Because I'm a data guy. So I love anything that's like, use the numbers don't lie. Numbers never do.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're correcting the
Absolutely.
right numbers and, you're not being hallucinated by some AI,
Yeah,
then it should be
exactly.
good. They should be great. So I think that's a fantastic story. I think a lot of things, this relates to other things. This may be great. I may be great at data, but I may be terrible at something else. And not having a fundamental understanding of, let's say, sales pipelines or marketing funnels or whatever it is, where it's like, just get a basic understanding of how that is, and it'll really help you carry forward. I think that's really important, especially for small team founders who can't really be experts at everything. We talked a little bit about this in a very early podcast about what we call T-shaped skills. So things that everybody needs to build. A depth in the area that you're supposed to be strong at, but also a broad enough skills so that you can be competent in other areas. It's fantastic. Well, this has been a fantastic podcast. We have 3 rapid fire questions I ask all of our guests, and they always get different answers. So just fascinated by what you're about to say. I have no idea what it is. So the first question is always about tools because everybody wants to know, give me some tool tip, right? So like what's one tool or automation or AI or whatever it is that you absolutely can't run your business without, the one that gives you and your team the 10x leverage every single week?
Yes. So Claude Cowork is by far at the very top of my list. I used to be, up until 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, let me be completely honest. I was the guy that was checking our Amazon sales on an hourly basis. I would refresh, I would have it open, I would refresh it, I would have it on my phone, and it was affecting me. If we were not pacing where I thought we should be pacing for that particular day at that particular hour, I would let it affect me. And my kids would be like, oh, hey, avoid dad, for the next hour until sales go, and it's just like, this is not right. And so I use Claude Cowork to basically come up with a tool or a scheduled task where you monitor hourly sales. And if we see a 3+ hour surge of 30%, a consecutive hour, you send me a Slack notification. If we see 30% down for 3 consecutive hours, you send me a Slack notification. And so after I implemented that, it took a few days for me to kind of like wean off of this like refreshing, but I have not checked hourly sales in a few weeks now, and I have so much more bandwidth to do other stuff.
Right.
Tons and tons of stuff that I've done in Claude Cowork, but that is at the top of my list.
Okay, great. Yeah, so automation and data and notifications and things like that. It's fantastic. I guess the next question is with processes. So let's think about sort of ways of working, right? So what is one system or process that you think every lean leverage first team should have in place by the time they hit their first $1 million in revenue that separates the scalers, the ones who are truly gaining that compounding leverage here, from the grinders, the ones who are working so hard, they worked so hard to get to that first million, they'll have to work twice as hard to get to that second million. What would you maybe tell them to stop doing, or maybe something that they should start doing today?
Yeah. I think for the grinders, it's just there's no rule books, like you do whatever you need to do within the, grounds of the law. to get to your first million. And I think from there, like some of the things are staying up late to analyze the data, to update your listings, to do it weekly, to talk to customers, to get on the phone with customers, to send them handwritten cards. I mean, there's really nothing you can do at scale going from 0 to 1 million run rate. And then once you get to that point and you want to go from, let's say, 1 to 5 or 5 to 15, you do need processes. And I learned this the hard way. I was getting to a point where I was working a lot longer than I did as a consultant. And I just realized I'm doing everything myself right now. So, let's go ahead and have someone else do these like Bonjoro videos that I was doing for people that were signing up to our email list. And so we hired a bunch of stay-at-home moms, and they were basically doing these videos for us. We were getting the same result, but I wasn't doing any of it. And so I think when it comes to processes, you just have to kind of look back and see, okay, what worked getting us from 0 to 1 million? And what can be automated? There are some things where it's just, that was the only time we'll ever do that. But there are some things where it's like a lot of time goes into this and it's valuable, but the founder cannot be doing this again. And so I think from there, you build out a team, you have someone manage that, and you basically build a system around it. And I think for systems, it's as simple as get a screen recorder, record it, and then have someone transcribe it. And there's your system right there. And of course, as you get bigger and bigger, you can develop more professional SOPs, but just keep it simple. And there's always YouTube. If you need to find out how to do something, you can just find a YouTube video.
Yeah. Or have a chat now with an AI system and
Or
just
have a chat now.
It's great. I love these, AI in general. I use AI for everything all the time, including scheduling the podcast here and working with you on that, and soon to be editing this podcast. But also, I use it because I'm not afraid to say, hey, I totally don't get this. I'm an idiot here. Just explain it to me like I'm 5. I still don't get it. Show me like 20 more examples. And then at that point, you're like, now I get it. And that works great, because if you were to do that with the person, they'd sort of give up with you. And you can't really talk to a YouTube video as much. So I love that.
Exactly.
Last little rapid fire here, which is a tip. So if you can give one piece of advice to a founder who's running that dinner table size team right now that wants to scale, what tip would you give them?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip is really, your first idea, I hate to say it, is probably not going to work. Your second idea is probably not going to work. And so I think the name of the game, more than like all these like hacks and strategies and all that stuff, is just staying in the game long enough, because if I lost everything today and I had to start fresh tomorrow, I could probably rebuild this within 2 years, 1 to 2 years. Not because, the season has changes or the category has shifted. It's because I have so much knowledge in terms of, what works, what doesn't, what do I need to do now versus when I first started. And so the longer you're in the game, the more skills you're going to develop. And I think the longer you're in the game, the more chance you will have that golden goose find you. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of pivots, but eventually you will find that golden goose, pot. And I think from there, once you find that, you just go all in and do whatever it takes.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, that's a great place to bring things here for this podcast. And I just want to thank you, Max. You've been amazing. This has been a great 1 hour. I think it's worth the $5,000 an hour for all of our listeners. Multiply it by all of our listeners, and well, you're just a millionaire all over again. So I would say, thank you again, Max, so much for contributing, for being part of this, and for sharing all of your experiences and insights with our audience.
Of course, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So I always want to leave you with a great mantra, and I think Max ended it really well. So here's your mantra for the week. Stay in the game long enough to make all the mistakes, the recalls, the pivots, the closures. You heard them all. None of that was wasted. That's tuition in the school of life. So I really encourage you to put that into perspective. I love all of the analogies you gave here on, running a marathon and, and all the hits that you have to hit to make home runs. It takes a lot of strikes. I really appreciate all that. So if you loved this interview with Max Kang, I want you to hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share it with that founder friend who's still juggling 5 businesses when the one that matters is sitting right there in front of them and they're not giving it any oxygen. Also, if you're interested in learning more about Cupkin and connecting more with Max. Let me give you a few resources here. We will link to that in the show notes. You can go to Cupkin at Cupkin.com, Cupkin.com, great domain name. You can connect with Max on LinkedIn, or is it his Instagram, maximus.kang. You can also learn more about Cupkin and their Cupkin's Instagram at Cupkin Friends or Cupkin World. And our listener offer to you is just message Max on Instagram at maximus.kang with your questions. He posts answers publicly for the community. We love the build in public and the share in public philosophy. So on that note, I want you to think big, stay lean, and scale smarter on the next Exponential Scale podcast. Micro teams aren't the future, they're the now. If this episode got you fired up, hit that subscribe button, share it with your crew, and join the movement over at scalebrate.com. That's SCALEBRATE.com. Till next time, think big, stay lean, and scale smarter. Because you're not a tiny team, you're a micro team with mega potential. So get exponential, and thanks for tuning in to the Exponential Scale Podcast.